So I've been experimenting recently with these guys. These are little portable Watchman televisions. They are the Sony FD10A, and they're like $5 on eBay. But they power up and just show static because we basically haven't had analog transmissions here in quite a while now. I've been using them to learn a bit more about cathode ray tubes, and in particular how to drive magnetic cathode ray tubes. So basically, when you take a look at this thing and it's in TV mode, you see a big block of white light, just like that. But if we go down here to one that I've modified, you can actually see that there's just a single dot there. So if we take a look around, and always power these off when you're messing with them because they're pretty high voltages. On the inside of here, we have a big tube. And this is the picture tube, so this is the underside of where the white part is. I can put this right next to here, and now we have a side-by-side. So this is the screen here, and then this is the underside right there. The way those images are drawn is by changing the voltage, or the current rather, that's going through these copper coils right here. So as we saw just now, if I just turn this on right now with nothing going to those two coils, I've basically just cut the leads to both of them. Then we have an electron gun at the back of the coil that is basically shooting electricity straight forward, and then there's nothing to change the path of that electron beam. However, if we apply some current to either of these coils right here, it'll generate a magnetic field that will steer the electrons back and forth. If you've ever taken a magnet and put it up to an old TV or old tube TV and you see the image get distorted, that's because the magnetic field actually changes the direction of the electron beam. When the TV is operating the way it normally does, you'll basically have two different patterns that are going here. You have one that's going back and forth, and that's the scan lines. So basically that draws one line at a time all the way down the image, from the top to the bottom, I believe. And then the other coil up here, the smaller one, is the coil that actually changes the pitch of the beam in the vertical direction. And so that is what actually traces the beams down from the top to bottom here. So you basically have an X and a Y. It's scanning back and forth very, very quickly, and then it's also scanning up and down a bit less quickly. And by doing that in a very precise manner, and then varying the brightness of the dot that's emitted from there, you can actually paint pictures with a single light beam. But having modified this and taken all of those abilities away to paint pictures with light beams, what do we do with this now? This is a very, very crude headphone jack right here, but basically these three wires now go to those two coils that I was looking at earlier. So this black one goes to the ground, sort of a shared common connection between the two coils, and then the right and left channel on this headphone jack go to the other two coils. One goes to the X and one goes to the Y. And if we follow this cable all the way back here, we're just going to plug it right into my computer's headphone jack. And keep your eye on that dot. And there you go. So the trick here is to not think about your sound card as something that makes sounds. Think of it as a very precise, very fast digital to analog converter, because that's ultimately all it's doing. Your computer is sending values to some type of digital analog converter, and then it's adjusting the voltages that come out of those two right and left channels on your headphone jack. Instead of driving a speaker coil up and down, we're driving the coil of this, the magnetic field that is steering the electron beam in here. And in this case, the left channel of the music is doing the left to right, and the right channel is doing the up and down. And so you're getting this sort of like pretty pattern here. And again, it's kind of tough to make out in the videos here, but this looks pretty striking in real life because it's not pixels. There's no pixels here. What we're actually doing is steering an electron beam sort of like a fire hose all over the place and sort of letting the strength of it over time determine which lines are drawn and how bright they are. And so it's a very unique look. But when you just play music, it's a little bit unclear what's actually happening. So let's see if we can generate some tones that illustrate a bit more what's actually going on. Okay, so here we have, we're using a library called B Audio. And this is basically a little JavaScript library that lets you pass some math functions in and pipe them straight out to your video card, or sorry, to your sound card. So in this case, this is the same sound card we have hooked up. We currently are playing nothing to it, and so we see the dot of our electron beam right in the middle there. But if we were to play, for example, let's try something very simple. Let's play a sine wave to our horizontal channel. And so now if we just run horizontal.js, and there we go. Now we see the effects of a sine wave on the electron beam. So basically, out of our sound card right now is a voltage that's oscillating between -1 and 1 volts around the ground voltage, basically. And that is changing the magnetic field in the horizontal coil, and that's just spraying this dot all over the screen back and forth really quickly. But we have access to the other channel as well. And so if we were to, in addition to playing that on the left speaker, play, say, another sine wave a bit out of sync on the right. There you go. So now we're playing a sine wave left and right at 24 hertz, and then we're playing at 96 hertz this sine wave in the vertical, and so we're getting this sort of flowery kind of pattern that's jittering around. If we were to make these closer in frequency, or in fact if we were to make them identical, then we should see this motion stop and just see that frozen in time. So let's change our vertical to also be 24 and run this again. And there we go. Let's in fact make it double, 48. And here we go. So now we have a vertical that is exactly 2 times the horizontal. And so we're seeing this light beam travel here. And we can slow this down. So let's say instead of 48, let's make this 4. And then for the horizontal, let's make it 2. We'll stop both of these and you'll see our dot come back. If we rerun this, that is a much slower horizontal swipe. And we can do our vertical as well. And now you see more precisely how this is occurring. When you do this very, very quickly, there's a bit of an afterglow on the phosphorescent coating on the inside of the screen, and so it leaves a trail behind. And so the faster you do this, you can make images, and this is basically how TV images are made as well, but just by doing it very, very precisely. In our case, we're doing it pretty imprecisely, and by repurposing the digital audio converter that is in every computerized device in your life to make an oscilloscope driver. If we wanted to make this act a bit more like a standard oscilloscope, the way those work generally is that they have a fixed sweep across the horizontal. So they will basically just draw steadily across in a linear fashion and then jump back all the way to this side and basically form a steady line going across so that you can visualize how a waveform looks. So if we take our horizontal, and instead of doing a sine, we do a sawtooth wave. And let's just do that just at 1 so we can see exactly what's happening. And we'll cancel our vertical, cancel our horizontal, and number, I suspect. There we go. So now we have a phasor going, basically a sawtooth wave, and so what this is doing is, as the voltage increases, it drives the as the voltage increases from -1 on this side to +1 over here, it drives the electron beam across the screen. and then very abruptly when it reaches the end, it snaps back to -1. And so there's very little, you can still see there's a slight trail here because it is not a very powerful amplifier. It's just the headphone jack in my MacBook Pro, but it is enough to make it jump back pretty abruptly. So this is just at 1 Hertz. Let's bump this up to 24 Hertz and get a nice continuous but flickery mad scientist looking kind of line. Kind of a silver screen look. And now if we turn our vertical back on as a sine wave at 48 Hertz, I think you'll see what I mean. So now we see much more clearly the sine wave that we're generating on the vertical going across here. Basically, because we have a steady line being drawn, any changes we make in the vertical will be seen as occurring over time. And so if they are cleanly divisible by 24, which is our refresh rate right now, you will see it frozen in time. If we were to make this horizontal rate a little bit different than 24, then you would experience the same thing you get when you play 2 notes a bit off frequency on a piano, is you'll get this little ringing effect. And in this case, what we will see is that these will slowly go out of phase with each other, and so our sine wave will appear to move. So if we do 48.1 here and restart, now you can see that as time goes on, the vertical wave we're generating on the sound card is a little bit out of sync with our horizontal scan, and so you can actually see those waves being drawn out over time on the screen. And of course we can continue to increase this, preferably by things close to, or things divisible by 24. There's 96. And so on, and so on. And now you can see it start to approach what we know a TV to do if we draw a very high frequency and scan and continue scanning at a steady rate. You'll start to see that you get something a bit more like this, not very much, but a bit more like the square video image that you see when a TV actually powers on. So in this case, if we put this here, you'll see a little bit of what's happening compared to here. You're getting some scan lines going across on the horizontal and the vertical, and it's making an image and changing the brightness over time. In this case, we have the brightness set at a fixed all on, and then we're tracing out these lines by doing all of those changes manually. So if you want to pick these up, if you see one at a thrift store, grab them. Lots of good stuff in here. They're super cheap. You can't watch TV on them, but you can also modify them for composite video and hook them up to a Raspberry Pi pretty easily, which I'll go over in another video. So until next time.